As if we needed a reminder of why it is so important to focus on Pakistan, a country that has made so much progress and yet is experiencing turmoil that is a threat to innocent civilians, we were all recently jolted by the terrible shooting of a 14-year-old schoolgirl, Malala Yousafzai, targeted by the Taliban only because she advocated education for girls. That is the home country of our Lifetime Achievement winner. Zubeida Mustafa has been a journalist in Pakistan for 33 years. As the assistant editor of Dawn, a widely respected English language daily newspaper, she has worked through extreme political instability, media censorship, gender barriers, and social upheaval. She began her career in the 1970s when Pakistan was not an easy place for anyone. The first democratic elections since independence were held, but the military leadership refused to turn over power. The country fought its third war with India, in which hundreds of thousands died. A constitution was written in 1973 and suspended just 4 years later, when civilian rule ended with a military coup. Nuclear weapons were developed. The late 1980s and 90s hosted a period of extreme instability in the country as relations with neighboring India deteriorated and domestic politics were marred by corruption. As the first woman in Pakistani mainstream media, Zubeida Mustafa covered it all. Reporting on the current events of Pakistan during those decades was a difficult task for any journalist. Government-run media was used as a tool of propaganda to shape the public consciousness according to the whims of whoever happened to be in power. If the leadership didn't like a story that was published in a newspaper, the paper was shut down and the editor was thrown in jail. Zubeida Mustafa was a pioneer, reporting seriously on women's issues, on politics, education, poverty, health, and culture during a time when such matters were not discussed, and certainly not by a woman. She says the attitude was, if it's not so important, let the woman do it. But she said, I turned that to my advantage. She did so by taking lesser reported topics like health and making clear their relationship to bigger questions about politics and society. As the only woman in the Dawn newsroom during the 1970s, Mustafa explained that she used gender segregation to cover stories men could not. During Russia's occupation of Afghanistan in the 1980s, she traveled to refugee camps to interview women who had been driven away from their homes by war. She said a man would have had a much more difficult time getting that story. Zubeida Mustafa was well educated and a talented writer. She was also a wife and a mother, which disqualified her from working in the eyes of many. But in her words, married women were expected to stay at home and bring up babies and change nappies. We had to face that and still go ahead and ignore the things that were said in order to show people we could do both. She did both, and she did with dedication. When she wrote an article on breast cancer, a group of religious conservatives raided the Dawn newsroom and accused the paper of printing obscene content. Undeterred, Mustafa went on to write about contraception and about reproductive health. She also covered the case of rape victim turned women's advocate Mukhtar Mai when other writers were afraid to mention it. Mustafa says, a reporter must ignore critics and write the truth. Even if it is a tiny little drop in the ocean, you know you have made a contribution, so then you can have a clear conscience. She was the first woman on the editorial board at Dawn, where she advocated for hiring more women at all levels. She became and still is a role model, a mentor, and an inspiration to dozens of young Pakistani reporters. Even after formally retiring from the newspaper in 2008, and despite a vision impairment, she continues today to write regularly for the newspaper and for her own blog. One of her most recent columns just last week was about young Malala Yousafzai and the importance of education for girls. Please welcome the 2012 Lifetime Achievement winner, Zubeida Mustafa. so proud of you. I'm so honored to recognize you.